My name is John Mendez, and I am your host. Welcome to Walk to Wealth, where I motivate and inspire people new to the world of personal finance by letting you all in behind the scenes of someone who's still on his way. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, just do us one teeny tiny little favor. If you find any value in this episode, or have found any value in the episodes prior, just do us a favor and just refer us to a friend. We are trying to impact as many people as we can on their walks to wealth. And if you could just do it as one small favor of just referring us to a friend, that would mean the world to us. Without further ado, we have a super special guest today. We have my new friend, Kevin. Kevin, for anyone that may not know you, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
First off, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much, John. I am Kevin Palmieri. I am the host, the CFO, and the co-founder of Next Level University. We are a global top 100 podcast. We just crossed our 1,000th episode last month or the month before, and we have listeners in 125 plus countries. At one point, John, that was my dream, to be a full-time podcaster, and now I get to do it every day, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that, because the podcast for me is a passion project. So it's like hearing 1,000 episodes, and I'm at episode 30, at least at the time of this recording. It's like one day I just have to stick with it. And for Kevin, before you became a CFO founder and doing all these podcast interviews and episodes as well, before the success, tell us a little bit about your walk to wealth. Where did the story take place? How did it start?
Yeah, my childhood was fairly normal. I was raised by my mom and my grandmother, and I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. So I guess that part isn't super normal. Unfortunately, more normal than it should be, honestly. And John, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life, but I knew I didn't want to go to college. So I didn't go to college, and I just job hopped from job to job to job to job to job. Eventually, I landed this job as a foreman for, you can just call it a construction company. And I ended up making six figures at 26 with no college degree, crushing it. My girlfriend's a model. I'm in awesome shape, all these amazing things. But I was just miserable. I was so unhappy. I was so out of alignment. I was depressed. I was anxious. And I ended up sitting on the edge of a bed debating suicide. And that was my wake-up call to say, you know what? We're not doing the right stuff here. I quit my job and became a very broke entrepreneur in the podcasting industry. And every day since then, it's been about how do we grow the podcast? How do we add more value? And how do we really, really grow this thing? Like really, really grow it to a world-changing level.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, because at least from my personal experience, what I've found is like podcasting, both from me listening into it, listening to like other podcasts, and then from me starting my own, it's something about a podcast that is just so moving. I think it's because like the people who you do resonate with, because normally it's not video, it's audio only that you listen to, which makes it a little bit harder for people to actually resonate with you. So when it does resonate, I think it's very, very like inspiring, and you also still get that same educational style as you would as in a video, but just in podcast format. Yeah. And personally, for me, about 10 months in the space as a podcast host, and I've been listening to podcasts over a year now, a year or two. It's definitely my preferred way of learning about new stuff, and then probably YouTube. But podcasts are now starting to be on YouTube, so pretty much podcasting is the new wave taking over the world. I know you started off as a broke entrepreneur, right? That's how we all start off as an entrepreneur world. We're not making any money, and your sole focus was on growing. What was it like in your beginning stages with the podcast? When you first started out, did you already have an idea in mind as to what you wanted to speak about, or what was your headspace at there once you made the flip the switch?
Yeah, I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about. So I had started the podcast before I left my job, and the podcast was Hyper Conscious. The name of the podcast was the Hyper Conscious Podcast, and it was basically a conversation about deep thinking, deep thoughts, emotions, feelings, fears, love, relationships, dreams, whatever it may be. And then when I actually went all in, it very quickly became, okay, how do I make money? Because I'm $35,000 in credit card debt because I'm funding my lifestyle and the business on credit cards. I hadn't made $1 up until that point. So it was very much, okay, how do we actually start making money with this? And for us, one of our things that we do, and I actually got this from a buddy, he said, you got to scale the unscalable. When it comes to podcasting, and at least in our experience and our industry of self-improvement, it really is the person who has the most value will win eventually. I believe that at a deep level. I still do free calls. I don't have to do free calls. I can get paid to do other calls. But for me, the long-term benefit of doing one free call, meeting a listener, understanding them and building a relationship at a deeper level, they will pour more into the business eventually. And I believe in that at a deep level.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. There's Gary Vee always talks about, the strategy, jab, 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 give, yep. Or jab, jab, hook. Mm-hmm. And it's that constant thing of just giving, providing value. One of the core things I was taught, because I'm a Keller Williams agent, but as you know, success, the principles, you get around enough successful people. It's kind of the same thing yep. over and over in different ways. And it's like one of the things we always say is come from contribution, mm-hmm. which is exactly what you're doing. And so once you find out that the idea of you have to provide more value, and the self-improvement spaces, I don't know how saturated it was back then, but it's hyper saturated now. Yeah. Just like the personal finance space where I'm in, extremely saturated. Yeah. What ways were did you either develop or come up with or find that helped you, one, provide the most value, and two, just provide at least any form of value? Because when you're starting off, a lot of people tend to doubt themselves. So, well, what were you thinking in that time when you decided I need to pour more value into people?
I want to be honest and transparent. I still have doubts. I still doubt myself. I mean, I'm quote unquote successful podcast and all that. I still have my days where it's like, can I do this? This person know they're interviewing me? Like, do they know who I am? Am I going to mess this up? So I want to be transparent because I think that's, I think it's important that the results don't necessarily fix the inner game. I think that's an important distinction. But for me, it was this understanding that I have been our ideal listener. So I was somebody who had low self-worth. I had low self-belief. I had big goals, but I had no idea how to get them. It's an interesting thing because our demographic is actually women, which I never expected. I'm a tattooed bodybuilder who loves mixed martial arts and fighting. I expected to draw that kind of crowd. So the interesting thing is I was somebody who had a lot of self-doubt and I had a lot of issues with low self-worth. So what I did is I felt like I can just talk to myself. If I can just talk to myself about what I've struggled with, I'll be able to help people at a really deep level because I think a lot of people have struggled with what I have struggled with. So that was part one. And this is for any business, for anybody trying to, grow or scale or whatever it is. We were just very consistent. I mean, since Alan's my business partner, co-founder, and co-host, since we partnered up, we've never missed an episode. In over 1,000, we've never missed an episode. And there's not a lot of people who can show that kind of consistency. So value is contextual. Value might be a podcast episode. It might be a coaching call. But one thing value is for most humans is consistent. It stays over the course of a long period of time, thus adding more value.
Yeah. Aside from consistency and the one-on-one calls, what are some of your favorite ways to give back your value? I know you still do the one-on-one calls, and that's been a big part of giving back. What are some of your more fun ways? And podcasting, as you said, that's also providing value. So not counting those that you give value back to your listeners, your audience, and your community.
Yeah, I mean, we do free podcasts, we do free speeches, we do free trainings. We have an event that we do right now. It's once a year, but it's going to be twice a year where we have like a charity foundation that we have called Next Level Hope Foundation. So that's something that we are going to be doing. And another thing we do, and this is great for podcasters out there, we do every single month, we give $100 Amazon gift card away to somebody who reviews the podcast. So if somebody leaves us a review, they just say, hey, Kev, I left a review. We'll pick a name out of a hat at the end of the month, send them a $100 Amazon gift card, and they're off to the races. So those are a couple of things. I think it's the interesting part of it, John, is I'm talking to our listeners all the time. Like I have conversations in my DMs right now from listeners. And I think that is valuable, especially the more successful you get. I mean, this is what I say, and I'm not at this level by any stretch of the imagination, but imagine if somebody sent The Rock a DM and he sent them a video back. Like, just imagine, they would never go anywhere else. They are going to be the Rock fan forever. Now, I am not the Rock. That's going to be a long, 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 long road. But to some people, they look up to me. So when I send them a video, it's very much like, oh my goodness, I can't believe Kevin did that. It's really about understanding the perspective of the community for us.
Yeah, and when you're, in your beginning stages, how do you even, cultivate a community? Because sometimes, especially in the starting stage, it's like, you're being consistent, you're kind of posting a lot, but it's like, you don't really get too much engagement, and you're trying to like reach out to people in IG and comment on other people's posts and stuff like that. But it's kind of hard to build, a fan base, especially when starting off. How did you go about creating that community of not only people that listen, but people that like are, and what we call them at KW, raving fans, that are your raving fans that support you and, engage with your stuff and are commenting and are just all into what you got going on?
Yeah, in the very beginning, and again, I'll say this, Instagram was different 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We got a lot of shares and people would reach out. Instagram's different now. It is definitely more saturated. So in the beginning for us, people would reach out, and then in my mind, it would be like, okay, this person is somebody who listens to the show. What's next for them? So I literally did an episode. I have another podcast about podcasts that I did right before this. And I talked about the importance of understanding that your business model has to be cohesive. And the question is this: where do people go after this? So after this podcast episode, John, where do people go? Do they go to the mailing list? Do they reach out for a call? Do they go to a Facebook group? That question is super important, because a lot of people think, I have podcast listeners and I have people who are going to pay me. You're always going to have more podcast listeners than people who pay you. So you have to find places in your business for them to sit and settle and learn and nurture. So what I would suggest now is every time you put a post up, I would look at who's liking it and I would send them a message. Every time you put an Instagram story or Facebook story or whatever it is, I would look at who's seeing it and I would send them a message. And then you start nurturing that way. Eventually, people will reveal themselves as podcast listeners, but make sure you have enough layers in your business where you're not expecting people to go from listeners to paying you. There has to be several layers of free value in between, because that's where you build the relationship. People have to know you, like you, and trust you. So long story, I would say go on social media, find who's liking your stuff, find who's viewing your stuff, start conversations and communication with them. And then ultimately, you probably want to have a Facebook group where you can get people in based on value. That's probably the ideal.
Okay. And so it kind of looks like to me what you're describing is a funnel. For anyone who may not, be business savvy or, might be interested in starting a podcast or even anything, because the funnel can go from any, successful business model, no matter what industry. Especially when starting off, especially if you're doing a podcast and you don't have that business background, is this something that you kind of, had to hire help for to create and get it? I know you have a partner as well. Was it kind of him helping it, or did you always have in mind like the strategy of, okay, like, I know, I guess top funnel people that kind of listen to the show, bottom funnel level people are people that maybe do one-on-one coaching or come to the summit and select VIP seating. How did you kind of develop your funnel, especially as a one-man show? Because a lot of that stuff, you need some manpower to help you out, at least keeping it smooth. Yeah. What is a kind of like a simpler funnel for people kind of newer to this space?
Yeah, so I have to give all the credit to my business partner. He's got a master's in business. He's a genius. He's unreasonably intelligent. So he taught me so much about the business aspect. The simplest funnel, it's so interesting, John. I literally did this exact episode before, so I am hot off the press. I think of it this way. It's 5 layers, I think, and you're already doing most of them. You probably just don't know it. So this is the way I think of it. And when John says funnel, just imagine an upside down triangle. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a ratio game. It's a numbers game. So the top of your funnel is social media. Roughly 65% of podcasts get found via social media. After social media, where do you want people to go? You want people to go to the podcast. After the podcast, I always suggest a Facebook group. After a Facebook group, I suggest some sort of freebie that's a value add. So John could be 5 things to look out for in this market right now, whatever your area of expertise within real estate is. And then the bottom of your funnel, the last step, so the 5th thing would be something paid. It could be a paid mastermind, it could be a paid coaching call, it could be paid speeches, it could be a book, it could be a course. That's like the minimum I would do. And that, if you think it's value, ask. So Gary V, jab. This is jab. Left.
A lot of jabs.
A lot of jabs. But our business model has 25 layers. 12 of them are free. 12, like, we will do free speeches. A lot of what we do is scaling the unscalable. So the simplest one is that 5. And then you ask yourself this question. Am I putting level 10 effort into social media? Am I putting level 10 effort into the podcast, Facebook group, freebie, and then getting clients? And if it's going to be a business, you have to do all of those well. Take your funds, reinvest them into the business, thus getting more business, and then rinse and repeat. That's something we've done really well, is we reinvest so much of our money into the business, into team, into tech, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And so I guess, you want to give maximum effort, but how can you do that while, being stretched? Because not everyone can start off a podcast and go all in.
Yeah.
And even in my case, I'm a realtor. So it's like trying to work my schedule. And I'm also trying to build up like a social media business, because I'm teaching social media for realtors, because, I'm relatively young and most realtors aren't. Mm-hmm. So it's like I naturally have this proclivity to teach. And so I also naturally understand social media from growing up with it. So it's like I have a couple of things going on. So at the same time, we're assuming that most new people don't have, funds coming in from podcasting.
Yep. How
could they give level 10 effort at the simple funnel level, in the simple funnel model across all those things?
Yeah. I think the understanding that level 10 is contextual for where you are. I mean, level 10 in the beginning might be you trying to do 1 episode a week. It might be you doing 2 social media posts. I think that's the important thing is, we do 7 episodes a week. I post on social media every day. I go on 20, 30 shows a week, depending on what we have going on. But in the beginning, we were doing 1 episode a week. I was probably posting twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. So you have to ask yourself, okay, how much am I doing now? And what is 1% more I can do? That really is it. I think that's an important thing. And then I would say this, delegate as soon as you can. One of the biggest things, I had this conversation the other day. I was on on Zoom with somebody, and she said, well, it takes me like 6 hours to edit my podcast. And I said, how much is an hour of your time worth? How much? And she's like, I don't know, like $50. I said, so you're burning $300 every time you're doing your own editing. You could probably hire somebody to do it for $25 an episode. Right? And like, yeah, will it cost you $100 a month? Sure. But will it make you $200? That's your ultimate question. So I think that's an important thing to explore, is delegation doesn't always equate to expense. You can delegate based on your time. So John, you could help somebody with social media, or you could help somebody with real estate. Like, you can barter your services for somebody else's services, especially if it's a member of your community. But that's an important thing. At some point, you got to delegate. And usually the sooner you delegate, the sooner you have the necessity to actually make money.
Yeah. So right now I'm kind of caught in an intersection right now, because I love the idea of getting 1% better every day, but I also want to talk about delegation as well. But I guess to kind of pivot a little bit, let's go down to 1% better every day. How can you, when you're telling people this, because people most people think linearly. They don't understand how compound growth, really explodes their growth in the long run. What do you tell to people that, are kind of, have that limiting belief or a scarce mindset where it's like they can't see past the linear side of growing, and they, it's like, oh, but, yesterday was a hard day, so I didn't do this, or today's a hard day and I'll get back on it tomorrow. So
I think it's one of the hardest, and this was not natural for me. I'm not a number-driven human. I'm not a data-driven human. This is all very, very new. What you should do, there's a couple things you can do. Look up the magic penny. That's one great exercise. So if somebody came to you and said, do you want $1 million, or do you want a penny that doubles every day for 30 days? Most people are going to be like, million. Give me that cash money, son. But I think the the penny that doubles every day for 31 days, I think it ends up being $10.4 million or something like that. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but that's compounding. So I think you have to see it as an example, and you have to see the numbers. And when you see the numbers, it starts to make sense of, wait. 1% over 5 years is that number. There is no way that's humanly possible.
Yeah.
That you have to see it with your own eyes and understand that many of the decisions we make on the day-to-day are purely emotional. I feel this way, I'm going to do this because of it. When logically, if you can get a little bit better, when I say 1%, if you read 5 pages a day for the rest of your life, you'll probably get 1% better. But even if we say 0.1%, whatever the percentage is, it's small things that add up over time. So I think you have to try your best to remove the emotion and understand logically, with enough time, almost anything is possible for you. And you have to check in with your time perspective. How far ahead can you think? How far into the future can you think? And The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, great book. That's what I would say. Read The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. That'll help you understand linear versus compound thinking much better.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely on one of my books to read. I'm kind of caught in a place where my list of books that I need to read is growing faster than at the rate that I can keep up with.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm if you look at my notes in my iPhone, I have a giant list of books that I kind of accumulated that I have to read. Just even here in my house, I have about maybe 6 or 7 books that I have to read. I have 3 not right next to me that I can grab in arm's reach. I just have to get to reading them because it's so much. But now that we have the funnel set up right now. We're getting 1% better every day. But as you said, we're now starting to get to that point where we're too stretched, right? When you go about looking in delegation, as I said, most people that start this stuff, it usually starts off as a passion project. Most people, how do they begin delegating? Because the right hire will save you so much time, money, and effort. But the wrong hire will literally screw up everything. So what do you have to do prior to delegating to make sure that you're ready to bring someone on board? And then what do you look for in a person when you're onboarding? And then once you find that person, how does onboarding look like? Or how should it look like?
I think you have to, this is the interesting thing, is how do you delegate something that you've never done? That really is the billion-dollar question of, can you effectively delegate something that you have no experience in or expertise in? I think you have to try to understand the ins and outs of what's being delegated for a couple of reasons. 1, because you're going to know how long it should take. 2, you understand what your 100% quality is. And 3, you're going to understand if a charge or an estimate is actually accurate. So I think you should do a little bit of research in whatever it is, audio editing, video editing, whatever it may be first. But then you have to create some sort of system. You have to have some sort of standard operating procedure of, this is the way I want it done. This is the outcome that I'm expecting. And this is the budget, basically. And then that's your initial start. What are you looking for? You're looking for, and again, it depends, right? It depends on the culture. You're looking for somebody who is improvement oriented, somebody who is really, really good at taking feedback, because that is a winning attitude right there. Somebody who is consistent, somebody who is reliable, and somebody who is honest. I think those are the most important aspects to have. You can train up a lot of stuff. Starbucks had this saying one time where somebody said, how do you create such happy employees? And they said, we don't, we just hire happy people. Like, okay, yeah, that's one way to do it, right? That's a great thought. So that's the second thing I would say. And then the onboarding process is usually some sort of test. So this is there's a couple ways to do it. You could say, for instance, you want audio editing. You can create some sort of test file and then just say, hey, as a one-off, as kind of like a resume builder, can you edit this to the standard operating procedure? When you get it back, take a look at it. If it's up to standard, awesome. If not, give feedback and then go from there. This is the important part. You got to do weekly calls. You have to be on the phone or on Zoom with your team every week, focusing on 1% wins and 1% improvements. And that is a wonderful way to run your business, because as you learn and as you grow, you can teach more. As they learn and they grow, they can teach you more and they can connect better and you'll understand it at a deeper level. But you're building a relationship with this person. I think a lot of us want to just like delegate it and it gets done and we don't worry about it. That's fine, but it might not necessarily get any better. So that's the ultimate goal. If you can delegate something and get 80% of your quality while you're out doing 100% of something else, that's great. If you meet every week and you can get 81%, 82%, that's even better.
Yeah, no, that's definitely some amazing advice. I want to kind of touch back a little bit on the first point. What would you say to someone, because you know that saying that always gets thrown around as, oh, if you want something done, do it yourself, or you want it done the right way, you know, go and do it yourself, something like that. I'm butchering it. But what would you tell to someone like that? Because a lot of it is like ego. It's like it's hard to give up, you know, control over something because you have that mindset that, you know, no one else can do it your way.
I would say this, just because somebody might not be able to do it the way you do it doesn't mean it can't be done correctly. A lot of us are doing it wrong. That's the interesting thing, is just because you're doing it doesn't mean you're doing it more correctly than somebody else. So I think, to your point, John, you really have to check in with, I think part of it is a control issue. Mm-hmm. Part of it is the certainty of, well, I know I'm going to have last eyes on this before anything happens. And then I think part of it is there is some ego there of, it's not up to my standards. Well, sometimes your standards aren't realistic and they're not necessarily serving you long term, and they're a bottleneck, and you have undercover perfectionism that's holding you back. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, but I think that you have to think of it from the aspect of, if it was somebody else's product, would you be happy with it? Or would you say to yourself, oh my goodness, I can't believe the way this was done? Or would you say, yeah, that sounds pretty smooth?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great way to start thinking about it. I normally say, like, for me, you know, if someone else can do it and I can get my time back, sure. Yeah. Like, I just helped my friend move from our old apartment. And not only did I help her find the apartment to rent it, I also had to help her move because I'm a friend, right? So, and just moving it, and it was like, sheesh, like moving all the, you know, the mattresses and, you know, and the couches. It's not like things that are like overly heavy, but it's like awkwardly heavy. Yeah. We're at a point where it's like you can't really lift it up and pick it up like you could a dumbbell at the gym. So you can't exert your force, which makes everything so much harder. So it's like my whole time I was just thinking, you know, next time, because the spot they live in now is like has 4 floors. It's like they only had one in the spot they moved out of. Imagine doing this for 4 separate floors. So it's like that the whole time in my mind I was just thinking, yeah, next time delegation. Next time, delegation. But another question I want to ask you, because I know you said that you should have some experience, at least, just so you kind of just don't get screwed over. What would you say to someone who wants to leverage too soon? Because at least for me, like, for example, I want to start owning a couple rental properties, but at least I wanted to. I shifted that's a whole other story. I shifted from trying to own long-term rentals to like Airbnbs, but like when I did want to do long-term rentals, I was just going to get a property manager for the first property and just say, you know, screw it. I never want to be a property manager. What would you say to people who just want to leverage quickly and still, you know, have the weekly meetings and everything, but like just want to just like, I'd rather, if I don't have to learn something, I'd rather not learn it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And there's a lot of different ways you can go. The one thing you can't make up for is experience and perspective. So I have spent, and I'm not excited about this, John, but Monday and Tuesday, I spent 32 hours in spreadsheets, like between the 2 days, 32 hours, very long, terrible, boring days. But because we're getting our finances together for something that we have coming up. And I got to the end of it and I said, honestly, that sucked and it was terrible and I didn't enjoy that. But what I did learn was something that now I know forever. I will always know those books so well. I know spreadsheets better than I ever have. Now, when it is time for somebody to take that over, I can look at that and say, okay, well, it took me blank long. Now I know the numbers intuitively. So you can definitely do it, but you definitely run the risk of getting taken advantage of. Awareness is the determination on how accurately somebody can offer. So think of it this way. I don't know much about cars. Mm-hmm. If something happens with my car, I'm going to the mechanic, and if I didn't look up how much it could cost, who knows? They could give me any number in the world, and I'd be like, yeah, I guess that sounds reasonable. But if something happens, I go online and I say, it's making this weird noise. What could it be? Okay, look it up. What are the average costs? 500 to 1,200. Okay. If I go and they say 2,600, I'm going to say, wait, isn't this what it is? I just found this. So you need a little bit of awareness.
Yeah.
You can do it, but you're definitely running the risk of being taken advantage of more than you should. That's what I would say.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's sound advice. Once, we get to that stage of delegating, we have an idea, what would you recommend people start delegating first? What activities and things that they can start so that they could focus on improving their show and getting 1% better?
I would say number one, audio editing. I've heard a lot of people edit their own shows and they don't necessarily do it well. So like that's number one. But across the board in any instance, any business, whatever. So figure out what is 1 hour of your time worth. What's taking you the most amount of time that you like the least? Really, that's that kind of level where if it's taking you an hour to do a podcast episode, in that hour you could be out making calls to sell homes, you're burning money, thousands of dollars, as long as you're filling the void of time with profitable activity, is what I would say. So I would say probably audio editing in the beginning, definitely video editing, because most people just don't do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't put it on YouTube because they don't know how to video edit it, which ultimately in the grand scheme of things is hurting their podcast, it's hurting their social media, and it's hurting their opportunity to grow the business. So it's this weird thing of oftentimes you have to put money in long before you're going to get money back. And it's this weird cyclone that it doesn't always work. And sometimes you will lose money, but it's very hard to make money if you're not investing in it. Yeah.
And so one of the things I've learned so far in business is, at least I've been told, is right. You got to play red light, green light with your expenses, right? So, if you are not making that money, don't spend it. But as you said, it takes a while before a lot of investing into something before you ever see any returns. So what's your thought on that? And I also want to ask you as well, after you answer that, how do you differentiate between an investment and an expense?
I am more of the mind, and again, this is dangerous. This could be a dangerous way to look at it, but I try to look at the potential as well as the current. So if I have 15 people I'm building relationships with, and I have like 5 verbal yeses that, people say like, yeah, I'm going to start a podcast in the near future. In my mind, it's like, that's kind of accounted for. I'll account for that. So for me, it's more an understanding of the numbers at a deep level. It's an understanding of the trends. And this is another thing too, the understanding of the growth rate. I want to know how much our money is growing day to day, because that tells much more of a story than, we had a bad month. It's like, yeah, you can have a bad month and still be growing. So that's what I would say about that. What was the second one?
The second one is, how do you tell what is an investment from an expense, especially when you're starting off? I feel like it's hard to tell.
Oh yeah, it is. It is, because especially in the beginning, oftentimes your assets are current liabilities. If it makes you, and again, this also is questionable. If it makes you more productive, if it gives you the opportunity to make more money, those are really the two, I would say. So this is a good example. I was sleeping like garbage. My mattress was too soft. My wife and I had a bed that it wasn't great for me. And I texted my business partner and I said, hey, I need a new bed. And it's going to be like $5,000 because I need one of the memory foam and it needs to do the adjustable thing and all that.
Yeah.
And he's like, will it help you sleep better? And I said, yeah. He said, cool, do it. That's it. That's an investment. That to me, that is an investment. Why? Because will that bed help me make 5,001? Absolutely. So I think in the grand scheme, you have to think, is this something that will add value to me being more productive and thus making the money back? And that's why a lot of people, and I have this conversation with Alan, my business partner, all the time. A lot of people think buying a nice car it's a bad idea. I don't necessarily think it is. If that car is going to make you more money in the long run, I look at that as an asset. Now, I understand it depreciates extremely quick, and it's a terrible idea to buy a new car. But I think of it this way. If John pulls up in a very nice Mercedes, I'm going to think John knows more than he does. And that's just human nature. So if you can use that for marketing, I think that helps. Now, a lot of people take that way too far, and they do, take pictures on jets that aren't theirs. I'm not about that. But
yeah,
I think understanding that there's the long tail of a potential asset that might seem like an expense until it pays itself off. So that's what I would say. It's very, very challenging, especially early on.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you use a car example. So my friend who was my podcast is just me. I'm a one-man show right now. But the guy who was actually supposed to start the podcast was one of my childhood friends. We grew up together, and he's currently in school. But he bought himself a BMW. I think like a 2012, like 328i or something like that. I don't really know about BMWs like that. But long story short, he didn't need a new car, but he bought it anyways. At least it was relatively new. But from that, he likes cars in general. From that, he's grown and I still don't know how he did it, but his Instagram page from pretty much scratch to over 2,000 followers. Just using his car, as you said, for marketing, and going to other car shows and then meeting up with cars. So he's still not making a return from it, but it's like he's been able to build a massive community extremely quickly from like doing kind of what he enjoys, which is cars, and then also using the car he got to market it and things like that. So also I want to say, ask you, when starting off, what are some key investments that you should make to make you more productive and make this, this journey a little bit smoother in the podcasting space?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of productivity, just self-improvement wise, Audible is always worth having. What is it, $36 a month for 3 books a month, something like that. YouTube Premium or YouTube TV, whatever, or YouTube Red, whatever the one that doesn't have ads. If you're watching something and you're learning, and then you like get flow broken by, join 1-800-GOT-HAIR or whatever it is, it's probably worth the $10 in the long run. I think those are 2 pretty easy ones. One I would always suggest is the gym, some sort of fitness, because you being in your body is super important. And then it's hard, right? Because like for a podcast, being more productive, I would say those. One of the important things I would say is make sure your notifications aren't on your phone ever. Because that's a whole, how many DMs do you get a day? How many people are messaging you on LinkedIn? Make sure your phone is on silent, and the only people who can get through are your loved ones and, the people that you care for. That's a huge hack right there. And then make sure most of your social media pages aren't on the first page of your phone. That you don't want to be seeing that all day.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's one thing I did with my notifications. I made sure to turn all of them off.
Got to.
I'm always on Do Not Disturb. I turn on, there's no push notifications that come on. The only push notification is my Google Calendar, just so I don't forget things, because if not, I'll forget. Okay. Another thing I want to ask you too, in terms of, making investments, what are some of the biggest investments you made in yourself? I know you kind of mentioned YouTube Red and Audible and going to the gym, but aside from that, because you're already in the self-improvement space, so I mean, that's your niche and that's your bread and butter. But what are some of the biggest self-improvement investments that you made that you've seen like really spark monumental change in your podcasting trajectory, and 2, just your life?
Yeah, I would say so. Early on, we went to a lot of events. We went to 2 Brendan Burchard events, which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, tickets aren't expensive, but traveling and hotels and all that, that was expensive. So that was probably, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000. We did that 2 years in a row. We went to another conference in Florida, which was just terrible, but we learned a lot of experience. We learned a lot of lessons, and we had a lot of experiences. For me specifically, most of the stuff I've done is big stuff that scares me more than like a $2,000 course or something like that. I remember I bought a Brendan Burchard course that was a couple $1,000s, which was how to make a course. And it was really good. It was really, really, really good. But yeah, I would say for me, it's usually me getting outside of my comfort zone and traveling somewhere where I'm in way over my head. For most people, I think it's probably coaching. I really, really do. But now this is where things get weird, because there's a lot of coaches now and it's hard to vet people, and you really, really got to do your homework. You really got to do your homework now more than ever.
So when you were growing, how early on did you invest in a coach, and what was it like, finding a coach in the podcasting space in terms of like what you were looking for specifically?
Yeah, we've never really had a podcast coach. Honestly, yeah, it's one of the things that we're focused on is making sure everybody in our community we have the same core values. So like we had some people that we were connecting with in the beginning, and it was like there's just so much ego there, and I'm not trying to network my way to the top, so that's not going to work. And for us, John, I've just failed so many times. I've just failed more than most people. I mean, 1,200 episodes, you're going to fail, or 1,100 episodes, you're going to fail 1,100 times. So
yeah,
I've just learned so much and I've studied it. So yeah, we haven't really had any podcast coaches. This is what I will say though. We were coached by Evan Carmichael for a time, as well as David Meltzer. We were coached by both of them. And it was based on the fact that they believed in us more than anything. And we didn't pay anything for that. One of them was we did a pre-roll for Dave on our podcast. Mm-hmm. So it was just this podcast is sponsored by David Meltzer. So that was a couple of important things. But I also understand that most people, especially in the beginning, they're not going to attract that level of mentor, and you're not going to be able to afford that in the beginning either, because those are pretty expensive coaches. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's very challenging. I think I would probably go YouTube books first, because the coaching and mentoring, it gets expensive pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to ask you kind of, because we're not putting all this together. So we started our podcast, right? We're getting 1% better. We're getting to the point where it's like started getting busy. We're learning on YouTube. We're starting to delegate. I want to take it back a little bit to the funnel, just because that's usually how most of the income doesn't come from actually podcasting. It comes from generating that. How can one come up with a funnel in terms of like the different stuff? I know you said Facebook groups and everything, but like for the last one, which is usually the hook, how does someone come up with a good hook that aligns with what they want to do? And if they just started a podcast because they have a story that they like to tell and keep it going, like, a lot of time you have a passion project. It doesn't start off as as you have a business plan and you know exactly what you want to serve or you want to produce. How does one come up with a good hook that aligns with what they're doing? And if they don't know what they're really in it for in the long run, how do they get clarity as to that, so that then they can make that hook?
It's the simple question I ask everybody is, what is the number one problem that your podcast is solving? That's it in a nutshell. And that's how I frame everything. Okay. And it could literally be this. I mean, I'll step outside of self-improvement because I understand not everybody's doing that. The number one problem my podcast is solving is helping people make better sports bets. Okay. The social media would be all about that. The podcast would be all about that. The Facebook group would be, these are the top 5 picks of the week. The freebie could be how to spot winners and losers. And the paid thing would be, if you sign up to the premium tier, you get my picks a week in advance, like the bets that I'm going to place. So you have to ask yourself, what is the number one problem my podcast is going to solve? And what are my listeners' pain points? And it is your job to solve them with your content and make sure whatever the thing at the bottom of your funnel is the most valuable piece of that. It has to be the most valuable because people are going to pay for it. So yeah, usually it has to be something that will help them be deeper in love, be in better shape, make more money, or have more success. That really is kind of it. It's usually some kind of result that they're looking for, but it's based on the value that you add through understanding what is the number one problem they're dealing with. It's very contextual, you know?
Okay. And so I think I want to take it where, let's say you start a podcast. Let's say, I played football. Let's say I was like, I really want to make a podcast talking about, football and whether it's sports or, high school football. Let's say high school football. How would one then go out to find their audience, to find the pain points? Especially more so when that community hasn't been really developed yet, or nurtured in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of difficult reaching out to strangers or people you don't know, and
Of
like,
course.
hey, you know, what are you struggling with? And not the best icebreaker to, you know, start a conversation. So where would you go, or what would you do to find the struggle point? That way you can cater your all your, you know, your jabs to that, you know, that struggle point.
So let me reframe. For some podcasts, let's just take out the problem that you're solving. Let's replace struggle point with problem that you're solving. Comedy podcasts are solving boredom. So it might not necessarily be a value add. So just to reframe that, I would go into Facebook groups and figure out what people are talking about. I would Google keywords that you're going to think of using, and I would figure out what are the top articles, what are the top things that come up, because those are the ones that are getting clicked on most. And I'll also say this, not every podcast is really going to have the ability to monetize at the same level. I mean, if you're doing a high school football podcast, you might be able to do merchandise, right? You might be able to do that. But outside of that, I mean, there isn't necessarily a coaching aspect there. Yeah. So the business model is going to be, and the opportunity to make money is going to be a little bit different. Our opportunity to make money is vastly greater than most because, number one, there's two of us. That's a huge upside. So Alan is probably coaching as I'm doing this, right? So we're making money right now. The other part of it is we're very deep into self-improvement, and we both understand business at a pretty deep level, which helps us. So I would say that you might not be able to have the same upside. You won't be able to have the same upside, but maybe for you, it's merchandise. Or maybe for you, you do go get a sponsorship. If you're, I mean, think about this. If you're doing a podcast about high school football in somewhere where high school football is very valued, odds are maybe the high school will throw you $500 a month to talk about it, to bring eyes to their games. Like, there's a lot of ways to get creative, but it might not be life-changing money.
Yeah. Okay. And I wanted to ask you this, and I'm sorry for not asking you sooner, but good. Let's say someone wanted to start a podcast with someone else, especially when it comes to monetizing it, because it's one thing if it's a passion project, but like when the opportunity for there to make money comes into play, sometimes, especially if you're doing it with a friend or family member, things could get a little weird. How is it like for you picking Alan as a partner, and what advice would you give to someone who wants to start a podcast with someone, especially if they have either the opportunity to monetize down the road, or the end goal is to monetize even from the jump? What advice would you give to someone looking for a partner?
Yeah, number one, make it an actual business. So like, we're an actual LLC. I have 51% ownership. Alan has 49% ownership. I'm technically the head of it all. So that's one thing, is make sure it's legal. Even in the beginning, like, if you're really thinking about doing it, throw $500 and get yourself an LLC. That way, if anything happens, you have everything in writing. So that's part one. The second part is you have to make sure your core beliefs, your core values, and your core aspirations are in alignment. That is the name of the game. So if your core belief is, say, John and I have different core beliefs of hard work is necessary for success. Say John's the type of person who says, I feel like I should only have to work 2 hours a day to be successful. And I'm thinking like, well, I'm doing 16-hour days, man. Like, this isn't gonna work. How long before we have a break in rapport and I say, John, you're not holding up your end of the bargain. There's no way this is gonna work. That's a core value in conflict. Hard work. A core belief could be something along the lines of, if we can sell this product even though we know it's not good for the consumer. We care more about money than we do anything else, right? So if somebody believes, well, I want to put the listener first, the customer first, and I need to take care of them, I need to be in alignment with myself, I want to be virtuous, and the other person says, no, it's all about money. It's all about money. We can sell cigarettes and alcohol, whatever. That's not going to work. And then the third one, and one of the most important, is the core aspirations. Alan and I have a similar core aspiration of bringing self-improvement to the masses, AKA, we didn't start a podcast for passive income. We didn't start a podcast to work less. We work more than we ever have, and that's probably going to keep going for the next 50 years. But if that ever shifts, this business will not work together. If I decide, hey man, I only work, I want to work 2 days a week, I don't aspire to changing the world anymore, it won't work, and we'll have to part. So yeah, I would say you pick your partnerships, and you can pick your friends, you can pick your mentors, you can pick all relationships based on this: core beliefs, core values, and core aspirations. If you have too many of those that are incongruent, the relationship probably will not work long term.
No, that's amazing advice. And, as you probably know from podcasting, some people come and, try to pitch, and other people come on shows and just provide massive amounts of value, which is what you did today. If anyone could, want to learn more, connect with you, find you, what would be the best way to get in touch with you and just, try to get at some of your knowledge that you have so much of?
I appreciate the kind words very much, John. My handle on Instagram is @NeverQuitKid. I do all my social media. I do all my DMs. Please send me a message. And our podcast is Next Level University. New episode every day. So we're happy to bring you on to listen if you're interested.
And so you guys all hear that. Make sure to go follow him and go check him out. Time for the final 4 questions, which is my favorite part because I get to catch you off guard a little bit. What is the most impactful lesson you learned in life?
Oh, my goodness. The most impactful lesson I've learned in life: where you are today is not where you are forever, unless you believe where you are today is where you are forever.
No, that's deep. That's deep. What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Humility. 1,000,000%.
If you wanted to change someone's life with one book, what would you recommend?
Probably The Compound Effect, because we're talking about it. Compound Effect.
1% better every day.
1% better every day.
And what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
I have several. One, I just want people to say, you know what? He was a good dude. And like, if they remember nothing else, he made me feel really good. He made me feel safe. He made me feel supported. He was just a good human who is caring and is trying to help. The second one is, I would like everybody who ever comes in contact with me to use that as an opportunity to improve a little bit and say, I inspired them to improve a little bit. And I think if you can help one person, you really can change the world.
Yeah, it goes back to the levels of connection. You're only, what is it? If you know 1,000 people, those 1,000 people know 1,000 people, and those 1,000 people know 1,000. That's a billion right there.
Yep.
That's
the world.
Right, exactly. And so, Kevin, I had an amazing time interviewing, honestly, and I wish we had more time. But all good things must come to an end, right? It was a pleasure having you on the show. I really, really thank you. And I know my listeners will take tons of value from this. And I appreciate your time. And thank you for coming on.
I appreciate you. Your listeners are very lucky to have an amazing host like you, John. This was truly wonderful.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're very welcome.
Thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. Again, I am your host, John Mendez. You can find me at JohnMendez_realtor and at Walk to Wealth on Instagram. Please make sure to subscribe and leave a review if you're loving the podcast so far. New episodes are released every Sunday. Look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Take care.